in which our happy couples learn that life is not easy, whether as newlyweds or as recent divorcees. Chapter 21. From the moment when Alexey Alexandrovitch understood from his talks with Betsy and Stepan Arkadyevich that only one thing was required of him, that to leave his wife alone and not bother with his presence, and that his wife herself wished it, he felt so lost that he could decide nothing by himself, not knowing what he wanted now, and giving himself into the hands of those who took such pleasure in looking after his affairs. He agreed to everything. Only when Anna had already left his house and the English governess had sent to ask him if she was to dine with him, or separately, did he understand his situation clearly for the first time, and it horrified him. The most difficult thing in that situation was that he simply could not connect and reconcile his past with what there was now. It was not the past when he had lived happily with his wife that puzzled him. He had already suffered through the transition from that past to the knowledge of his wife's unfaithfulness. That state had been painful, but comprehensible to him. If his wife, declaring her unfaithfulness, had then left him, he would have been grieved, unhappy, but it would not have been this hopeless, incomprehensible situation which he now felt himself to be in. He simply could not reconcile his recent forgiveness, his tenderness, his love for his sick wife and another man's child, with what there was now. That is, when he, as if in reward for it all, found himself alone, disgraced, derided, needed by none, and despised by all. For the first 2 days after his wife's departure, Alexey Alexandrovitch received petitioners. His office manager went to the committee and came out to eat in the dining room as usual. Without realizing why he was doing it, he strained all his inner forces during those 2 days, merely to look calm and even indifferent. In response to questions about what to do with Anna Arkadyevna's rooms and belongings, he made great efforts to give himself the look of a man for whom what had happened had not been unforeseen, and had nothing extraordinary about it, and he achieved his goal. No one could notice any signs of despair in him. But on the 3rd day after her departure, when Cornet handed him a bill from a fashion shop that Anna had forgotten to pay, and reported that the shop assistant was there himself, Alexey Alexandrovitch ordered the assistant to be shown in. "Excuse me, Your Excellency, for venturing to trouble you, but if you would prefer to have us deal with Her Excellency, be so kind as to inform us of her address." Alexey Alexandrovitch fell to pondering, as it seemed to the shop assistant, and suddenly turned and sat down at his desk. His head lowered onto his hands, he sat for a long time in that position, made several attempts to start talking, and stopped. Understanding his master's feelings, Cornet asked the assistant to come some other time. Left alone again, Alexey Alexandrovitch realized that he was no longer able to maintain the role of firmness and calmness. He cancelled the waiting carriage, ordered that no one be received, and did not appear for dinner. He felt that he could not maintain himself against the general pressure of contempt and callousness that he saw clearly in the face of this assistant, and of Cornet, and of everyone without exception that he had met in those 2 days. He felt that he could not divert people's hatred from himself, because the reason for that hatred was not that he was bad. Then he could have tried to be better, but that he was shamefully and repulsively unhappy. For that, for the very fact that his heart was wounded, they would be merciless. People would destroy him, as dogs kill a wounded dog howling with pain. He knew that the only salvation from people was to conceal his wounds from them, and for 2 days he had tried unconsciously to do that. But now he felt that he was no longer able to keep up this unequal struggle. His despair was increased by the awareness that he was utterly alone with his grief. Not only did he not have a single person in Petersburg to whom he could tell all that he felt, who would pity him not as a high official, not as a member of society, but simply as a suffering person. But he had no such person anywhere. Alexei Alexandrovich had grown up an orphan. They were 2 brothers. They did not remember their father. Their mother had died when Alexei Alexandrovich was 10. The fortune was small. Their uncle Karenina, an important official, and once a favorite of the late emperor, had brought them up. Having finished his school and university studies with medals, Alexei Alexandrovich, with his uncle's help, had set out at once upon a prominent career in the service, and since then had devoted himself exclusively to his service ambitions. Neither at school, nor at the university, nor afterwards in the service, had Alexei Alexandrovich struck up any friendly relations. His brother had been the person closest to his heart, but he had served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and had always lived abroad, where he died shortly after Alexei Alexandrovich's marriage. During his governorship, Anna's aunt, a rich provincial lady, had brought the already not-so-young man, but young governor, together with her niece, and put him in such a position that he had either to declare himself or to leave town. Alexei Alexandrovich had hesitated for a long time. There were then as many reasons for this step as against it, and there was no decisive reason that could make him abandon his rule. When in doubt, don't. But Anna's aunt insinuated through an acquaintance that he had already compromised the girl, and that he was honor-bound to propose. He proposed, and gave his fiancée and wife all the feeling he was capable of. The attachment he experienced for Anna excluded from his soul the last need for heartfelt relations with people. And now, among all his acquaintances, there was no one who was close to him. There were many of what are known as connections, but there were no friendly relations. Alexei Alexandrovich had many people whom he could invite for dinner, ask to participate in an affair that interested him, or to solicit for some petitioner, and with whom he could candidly discuss the actions of other people in the higher government. But his relations with these people were confined to one sphere, firmly defined by custom and habit, from which it was impossible to depart. There was one university comrade with whom he had become close afterwards, and with whom he could have talked about a personal grief, but he was a school superintendent in a remote district. Of people living in Petersburg, the closest and most likely were his office manager and his doctor. Mikhail Vasilyevich Sludin, the office manager, was a simple, intelligent, good and moral man, and Alexei Alexandrovich sensed that he was personally well disposed towards him. But their 5 years of work together had placed between them a barrier to heartfelt talks. Alexei Alexandrovich, having finished signing papers, sat silently for a long time, glancing at Mikhail Vasilyevich, and tried several times to start talking, but could not. He had already prepared the phrase, "You have heard of my grief?" But he ended by saying, as usual, so you'll prepare this for me," and dismissed him. The other man was the doctor, who was also well disposed towards him, but they had long ago come to a tacit agreement that they were both buried in work, and always in a hurry. Of his female friends, and of the foremost of them, Countess Lydia Ivanovna, Alexey Alexandrovitch did not think. All women, simply as women, were frightening and repulsive to him. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.